Welcome to today's webinar, Embracing Outsourcing as a Strategy. Hello, my name is Dave Getz, and I will be the host of today's webinar. I am a part of the leadership team of RevCycle Partners, and we are just excited that you are here today. I hope it is sunny where you are at. We are in Chicago, or in the Chicago area, and I think it's supposed to rain all weekend, so we need a little sunshine this afternoon before we head into the weekend. Before we begin today, I would like to do a little housekeeping. We have muted all of you to keep the noise down, and I know the dogs are going to be barking and the phone is going to be ringing, so you have all been muted. But we want you to post questions throughout the webinar today, and we will pick those up and then have our panelists respond to those at the end of the webinar. So be sure to do that, and where you see where you can post questions and post your question throughout. This webinar is being recorded, and we will make it available to you. You'll get a link that is emailed to you. So, and in fact, you need to leave early or you want to forward it on to another colleague, you can do so. Our industry is embarking on something we never envisioned, the idea of reopening. And I know, having talked with several optometrists this last week, that the reopening is already beginning. No one could have envisioned the idea of a complete shutdown of our practices. So in today's webinar, we want to talk about a more strategic topic, and that is the topic of outsourcing. This is not a new topic, obviously, but it has been gaining momentum in many industries for years as organizations have tried to focus on their core business and really become more lean. Today, we have invited three voices to the table to help us understand the value of outsourcing and whether the decision is a good fit for you and what specifically should you outsource. Our first panelist is Dr. Breedlove. He's our veteran today, and he began his practice more than 35 years ago, and in 2015 he sold his practice, and today he continues to practice as an optometrist, also in the area of telemedicine. In a few minutes I'll let him talk about that. Our second panelist is Kelly Jackson. Now, Mr. Jackson is an entrepreneur, and he and his wife, Monique, it's Monique, is that correct? Helped start a practice. The two of them started a practice in New Orleans, and actually now are a multi-location practice. And the name of the practice is called Eyes on Canal. Our third panelist is Paul Harchey, who is the CEO and co-founder of RevCycle Partners, which formerly separated from Revolution EHR in 2018. Before that, Paul was the COO of Revolution EHR. Why don't we begin the webinar with you, Dr. Breedlove, and give us a 60-second overview of your life, and also tell us what you're working on right now.
Okay. I'm born and raised in Virginia Beach, and after graduating optometry school SCO, just things worked out well. Instead of joining a group, I had the opportunity at that time to open my own practice cold, and eventually grew it into 5 locations in Southampton Roads, Virginia Beach, Norfolk, and Chesapeake, Virginia. We had one of the largest private practices in the whole state, and in 2015 it worked out well that my associates came to me and made a great offer to buy me out. So I ended up still working for myself in my original location until actually September of last year, and merged that practice with an ophthalmologist in Virginia Beach, where I continue to work now.
Thank you very much. Kelly, you and your wife just opened a second practice in New Orleans. Tell us about Eyes on Canal and your mission.
Sure. So thanks for the introduction. Happy Friday to everybody. Hope everybody's got a fun weekend planned. I know this was a big week for everybody getting back to it, but a little bit about me and our practices. So I was fortunate enough to meet and marry my wife, Monique, Dr. Monique Jackson, as she insists I call her, especially in front of our staff. Yeah, she's a UHO grad, and I'm a New Orleans native, so we moved back home after her graduating. Her family has a history of ODs. Both her grandfather and aunt are both ODs here in Louisiana, which gave us a little bit of confidence to come down to my hometown of New Orleans and start cold, actually. So we started our first practice in 2016 called Outsourcing Canal. I have a background in finance. I've held a couple jobs, run a couple different businesses. And generally speaking, my wife was the doctor, and I kind of took off with the business and consulting aspect of our practice. So I find outsourcing is really relevant to everything we do, as time's a pretty valuable resource. And we've had some early success for the first couple of years of practice number one. We just opened our second location just in October of last year, actually. So still really getting that one off the ground, but happy to be here and happy to share some thoughts today. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Paul, how about you? Could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks. Thanks, Dave. And thanks, everybody, for spending this Friday afternoon with us. So, yeah, my background and career has mostly been in the software area or arena in a variety of industries. And then I got connected with the founding group of Revolution EHR back in, I guess I'd describe it as their garage phase very early on. I spent 10 years helping build Rev EHR as the chief operating officer over there. So I guess for most of my career, I've been, I guess I would describe it as a consumer of outsourced services, various services for the different companies I've worked at. But about 5 years into the Rev EHR journey, we launched RevCycle and a couple other services at the time. And as you mentioned, Christine and I had the opportunity to spin out RevCycle as a standalone business a couple years ago. And so now I'm really focused on the delivery side of outsourcing and kind of knee deep into that topic.
All right, well, let's begin with our first question. Dr. Breedlove, why don't you start? What to you is a simple definition of outsourcing?
I'm going to put it about as basic as you have, is letting somebody else do something you don't want to do. And then being a little more specific on that, there's always going to be somebody that can do something better than what you're capable of in your organization and your practice. And being able to find those people to take those chores away, especially those that can make you money, is paramount in practice nowadays, or any type of business.
What was the first part of your practice that you outsourced way back in the day?
The first part that we practiced that we outsourced was our billing, and then it ended up being went to filing for insurance, and that was really the two things that we emphasized on, that we wanted to get out of our office at the time. And that's pretty much where we went with the outsourcing and with my career.
Kelly, how would you define outsourcing, and what have you decided to outsource now that you have grown into 2 locations?
Yeah, sure. So simple definition of outsourcing, I'd have to agree with Dr. Breedlove. It's simply put, it's outsourcing your tasks and duties that you're not very good at, and tossing them over somebody that is much better at it, much more efficient at it. For us, time is our most valuable resource. And as we look at our priorities in our practice and we find we're spinning our wheels with one particular aspect or facet of our business, and we're really struggling with it, then we'd immediately look to outsource those activities. So for me, at the onset, truly, having I'll go with zero, knowledge of the optometry industry, and even less so about insurance and billing. That was one of the very first ones we outsourced right away. I'll tell you, one of the ones we struggled with mightily at the onset, that I'm not even sure there was a business that provided this at the time, but another one was credentialing. So I'd say between billing, coding were the first ones, and then social media and marketing was really the next step that we outsourced right away. To do that right and to build a brand takes a tremendous amount of time, energy, effort, creativity, that we simply could not afford to invest in. So we outsourced that right away too, within just a couple months after opening, and I feel like it's paid off really well.
Paul, on the other side of outsourcing, what have you learned are some of the common myths of outsourcing?
Yeah, I guess as I think about our conversations with practices that are looking at our services, one of the misunderstandings is I think they often come into the topic thinking it's an all or nothing topic, that they're either going to, outsource the entire RCM topic to us or an entire billing topic to us, or they're going to keep it in-house with their staff. And I think the reality is it's more in the middle. We often augment a practice's team. We take on a piece that they can't handle, either through expertise or just resources. And so, whether it's our stuff, I think about the relationship we have with our IT firm that helps us out as an outsourced group, and the responsibility moves depending on what we need. So I do think it's really a blend and not an all or nothing type of proposition. And I guess the second one that I think about a lot from kind of misunderstanding coming in is most docs seem to look at the economic analysis, if you will, as their in-house staff wages versus our fees. That they kind of think that's the whole comparison. And I think you'll probably get into it, David. Is there other aspects of it besides just those basic wage to fee comparisons?
Why don't we go right into that, Dr. Breedlove? Why don't we go into the direct and indirect costs of outsourcing? So what are some of the direct costs, for example?
The direct cost of outsourcing is just the bill you get every month from the whichever company you are outsourcing and whatever you are doing, whether again it's somebody taking care of your website or the percentage of billing or monthly fees or something you got to write a check for every month. The indirect costs, I don't see a whole lot of indirect costs associated with outsourcing. It's all positive as far as I'm concerned. It's basically, though, you've given up a little bit of your ego because you've got your practice, you've got under control, you want everything under your thumb, and you just got to be willing to, be a little humble and let other people do some of the jobs for you that you think you know better. But we weren't sent to school to learn how to be business people. We were sent to school to learn how to be doctors. And oh, by the way, we've got to also run a business. And I learned quite a long time ago that I really didn't have the understanding of just accounts receivable, payable, all those factors, that it was just a big question mark. And we had to learn on the fly. If I had to do it all over again, I would have started outsourcing all these factors immediately as soon as I started. Would make my practice better, make my marriage better. Everything would have been a big improvement. And I'm saying that because my wife kept my books for 30 years. So believe me, and we're still together, and my wife wasn't even trained. So she had to learn on the fly. I kind of threw it on her and said, bye-bye, have fun. And yes, we are still married. So
Well, that's a good thing. Kelly, as you think about the indirect costs of keeping something in-house, you talked about social media and marketing, there's IT, there's accounting, there's all these different types of things that people outsource. How do you wrestle with the indirect cost of keeping it in-house? How do you account for that as part of your decision to either keep it in-house or outsource the function?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So I think at the onset, it's everybody's natural inclination to look probably at the direct cost, right? An employee count, satisfying one of those tasks, duties, role that you could outsource, and what does the outsourcing of that function or role actually cost you? In my experience, I'm always surprised to find that a lot of the outsourced companies that we leverage today are actually cheaper than trying to directly source it myself internally. I would say that's an added bonus. But for us here in New Orleans and our first practice specifically, we built a practice that candidly, we didn't really know exactly what we were doing at the onset either. And space was limited. We didn't necessarily design the space as well as we should. So our employee count became really important to us too. Everybody that we can free up through outsourcing, especially in this post-COVID world that we're going to be entering here soon, or we did, a lot of offices of practice across the country did this week, space is going to be at a premium. And so to be able to pull a staff member out of there, not just their staff and any of the employee benefits and everything you might provide them, that's another big one too that we've really struggled with, is staffing in general. So you think about this, just one less person to manage in your office, and really letting you focus on what's important and driving your bottom line in your office.
Paul, would you like to add anything to the indirect costs of what it means to have somebody in-house?
Yeah, I guess I'd agree with Kelly. I think of it, heavily around all it takes to keep, to build and keep a staff in place, the hiring, the training, the reviews and the issues that come with that, right? And so I think about the big indirect costs is the ease of burden on, staff related topics.
Kelly, do you have a philosophy of outsourcing, anything formal other than what you've already said?
So philosophy of outsourcing, I think it's an evolution, right? I think when you look at your practice, what I thought was important in the beginning when we first got started is maybe not so important now. So I think as your practice evolves and your needs evolve, so should, and as the industry evolves, so should your view on outsourcing in trying to not only stay competitive, but stay ahead of the times too. And I keep bringing it back to this post-COVID world. We know that the world is going to change. We don't know exactly what that world looks like tomorrow, but I'd say that the best and sharpest businesses out there are looking for inefficiencies across the board. And so I'm excited to see what other sort of facets and nuances are going to be presented to me, as we come out of this in the next months and years to come.
Why don't we just continue with that topic? Do you see anything really on the horizon with the post-COVID world? Do you see practices saying we are going to get leaner because we don't want to have to furlough staff in the future? Do you see any of those trends? I mean, it's not a trend at this point, but what does your gut tell you about what you think might happen?
Yeah, so I think two things come to mind. I think that first, you're absolutely right. I think that every practice across America, generally speaking, is going to have to reduce patient count at the onset. And that's going to become increasingly more important for the perception of safety and the reality of safety for both your staff and your patients. And then so we're actually reevaluating that now. We're 2 weeks into reopening and saying, with basically half staff and half patients, could we maintain that same profitability with less complexity, right? So that is a potential and a reality that I think should be explored. The other one for me too is really around your social media and marketing efforts. I think now more than ever, people are reaching out into those resources and wanting to be talked to by the businesses that are closest and mean the most to them. So having a brand voice and having a plan and communicating that proactively to your patient base is critically important. You don't want to rest on your laurels in this space. You really want to get out ahead of it. For an apples to apples comparison, somebody that shows they care and are trying to do the right thing will pay dividends for quite some time.
One follow-up question. So just on the social media side, do you hire like an individual freelancer? Do you hire an agency? What have you done in that area?
Yeah, so the first attempt was me, and me and my wife, and I thought we were terrible. I think good photography is important too, and iPhone pictures of your frame sitting on a desk aren't always the most appealing. So then we moved to hire somebody that was kind of a dual threat, if you will. She could be a optician and manage our social media. And And I think generally speaking, for whomever you hire, or if you're just looking at your own time, trying to do too much by yourself, you will never be as good as one professional could be in that space. So we have now moved to an agency, a local agency here, which is wonderful. I actually can go into their office and talk about ideas, spitball ideas. They come into our office, take pictures, and help us out in that space too. So that's where we're at today. And that was one of the most surprising. I thought that was going to be tremendously expensive. And our return on this has been, 3 to 4-fold, just right off the bat. So I'd encourage everybody to go take a look. I think we all get inundated with those folks that can help Google search pages all day long, but getting with a local marketing agency that really knows your business, your community, is critically important in this time.
Can I jump in?
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. Going back, it just ties in to present and past. In the past, the first thing we looked at, the first thing we outsourced was our marketing. I didn't understand, especially when social media first came to the forefront. You had to have a website and you had to have Facebook. That was totally foreign to me. So the first thing we really looked into doing is finding somebody that could handle all this for us, because we sure didn't know what was going on, and finding out how easy that was. And the return of investment was multiple because of the fact of this person knew what they were doing, better than trying to keep it in-house, and they were able to do what needed to be done to get our name out there. And then after that, let's look at the next thing that we don't have to worry about doing in-house. So let's look at the next thing we can look at without doing it in-house. So you pick your thing that you really don't like doing too much and it's taking a lot of your time, and start there. And then keep finding out that, wow, that really wasn't that bad, and it didn't cost as much for your return on investment. And then you can start adding layers to make sure you have too many staff members, because staff will just drag your profits down, especially if you got those that you got to go. And that unemployment insurance bill is not a pretty bill that you get every quarter.
Wow, thank you so much. That was very insightful. Both your comments were terrific. Dr. Breedlove, you have reached nirvana in the sense that you have sold your practice, and so that's just an incredible achievement. And how does the fact that many or some of the facets of your practice were outsourced, did that affect positively or negatively the sale of your practice?
Dramatically positively, because I looked at buying practices in the past also. Some of them I purchased to build my little mini empire, and some of them I turned away. The ones I turned away was mostly of the docs that thought they could do everything, were trying to do everything, and when you really got down to look at what the accounts receivables were, how much debt they're carrying and all the things they're trying to do, if you lose the doc, has any value? So one of the things I started with at a very early part in our practice, especially when I found out that my present associates came to me to investigate the aspect of purchasing the practice from me, I even more went to outsourcing more things, because when it came down to the fact of here's the numbers, they were very impressive, because I didn't have all these write-offs that some of your staff and all of our staff will do, especially the ones that are taking care of the insurance. If they get rejected, they get thrown, and a lot of times they get thrown in the bottom of the pile. Well, all of our accounts receivable were active, they were minimal, and our write-offs were extremely minimal, and there was a paper trail on everything. So it just had the value of the fact that you had control of what was going on, you knew where everything was, and it just makes your price when you come up, there's not that much negotiation, because you definitely show that this is what it's worth, and we know the money that's coming in, and we know that I don't have to worry about somebody quitting. Then what am I going to do now with a biller? Then the bills start piling up and nobody's filing, because you're scurrying around either trying to do it yourself, or you're trying to find somebody new to take care of care of this job. So it's very important and very valuable for the sale of your practice as much as you can outsource.
That is very, very helpful. Kelly, you have come to the decision to outsource your optical. That is unique. It was one of the first times I've heard people do that. Talk a little bit how you came to that decision and what the benefit has been for you and your wife.
Yes, so this was a big one. So we, in our first practice, my wife, well, I'll save that for a second. In our first practice, one of the largest value and dollar leakages that we saw in our practice consistently was in the optical. Services were very straightforward. You bill for your services, you collect, et cetera. The optical was very difficult when you're selling potentially $500–600 cost of good materials and then submitting for reimbursement and then really hoping and praying you get paid back if it was submitted properly, if your optician did it correctly, if they calculated the correct allowances on the front end, et cetera. And so for us, it was one of those things where my wife and I were poring over invoices every night till about 10–11 a.m. Just finding minor mistakes, $5 here, $10 here. We leveraged some of the Essilor Ultimate Lens package. Great, tremendous offer. But if that's not submitted properly all the way through, that it might end up costing you a couple $100 in cost of goods. And you only have to do that a couple times before you say, this we've got to look elsewhere for this. So anyways, the company we use actually came in and took over optical management. They staff in our office. They actually bill through our office as well, because I think it's a legal requirement as well. But they also bought off our inventory. So we collected about $45,000 worth of frame inventory back within the first 6 months of using these guys. Just that dead inventory sitting on your boards is now passed on to somebody else. So there was an immediate capital injection, but it was a scary step for us, and I'm not going to say we didn't go through some growing pains with it, because it was definitely a change of pace. And the importance is to make your office feel jointed as well. You never want to feel as if there's two companies running the office. And our specific partner in the space did a very good job, and we're about 10 months in now, and we're quite happy with them. So.
Was there any point that there was a gut check, like, oh wow, that changes cash flow significantly, and you're only getting basically your margin, you're not getting the entire amount, even though technically that it's probably better for you, just not having that cash going through the business is a different emotion, isn't it?
It is, and this brings up a broader point about your outsourcing partners. For me, those that collect only when you make money are some of the best partners in my mind, right? So it's all positive. There's no fees unless they don't collect a single penny until we get paid, basically. So and they operate off of a margin percentage of every dollar we collect, basically. And it's quite interesting, because when I laid out my calculations, they're actually saving me money in the long run in this space, and they're providing 2 staff members now that I don't have to pay for and worry about. So there is the immediate gut check, but I will say that those that are aligned in your revenue-driven practice are really the best partners for us. And we've actually seen an increase in net profits over the last couple of months, right up until COVID. So hopefully we can get back to the glory days where, it's always going to be better tomorrow, right? And that's
the best laid plans, right?
Exactly. So
I
definitely
do see. Oh, I do see a question here about more info on this company. Do you want to give the name? Is that okay without selling?
Sure. If it's okay with you guys, I didn't know kind of the nuances of this program here, but yeah, they're called Vision Associates, and they used to be partners in Vision, and now they go by Vision Associates. So okay. and everything is negotiable, so remember that. If anybody gives me a call, so.
We're trying not to sell during the body of this, but I thought that was a really good question. By the way, if you have any other questions be sure and send them over, because in a minute or two we're going to take a question if there's any additional questions. Why don't we move to this next question? And Dr. Breedlove, how do you, maybe let's reframe the question. How would you define what is your core competency of your practice that cannot be outsourced?
Patient relations. Your patients come to your practice to see you, and that's what you want. If they're just coming to because you just happen to be the cheapest place in town and you're happy with that, that's okay. But we're going to get to we're at the point that I feel even stronger than years ago, that relationship that the patient has with you is the strongest part of optometry. As I told every one of my associates before I hired them, and again, this is, looking at splitting our profession between, medical and vision per se, is that we're the only profession that people don't come into us because they're sick. It's not like, doc, I don't care who you are, pull my tooth, or I have no idea who the doctor was who took care of my fill in the blank, unless of course you've got foreign bodies or something. Patients are coming to you because of you. That's not going to be replaced. I have patients every day that I see that the first thing they ask me when I come in and going, "Oh, that's great. I thought you were going to retire," or in consequent, "You're not going to retire anytime soon, are you?" Which I don't really plan to, because that's the best part of our business. That's the one thing we have that no other medical profession has, is that relationship that we have with our patients, that their specific needs and thoughts that they have that we can address. We can do anterior segment over telemedicine. We can do diabetic retinopathy evaluations by taking images, which I presently do now. But there is no patient relationship there. But it's being one-on-one with each patient, with the family, that makes us different. That's just never going to be replaced.
That is excellent. Kelly, any follow-up to that? You want to piggyback what Dr. Breedlove said?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I totally agree. I think, in my time in this industry, it became clear it's a highly commoditized industry, or at least that's the way it began to feel. So the only thing that you're going to have to set you apart is you and your staff and the experience you can deliver. Sorry, there's my daughter. Sorry about that. But she agrees. But with that being said, I think there's a flight to quality, both in quality products and quality service. Those that are going for the cheapest thing, let them shop online. That's not going to be private practice optometry unless somebody approaches me with a new outsourcing idea in that space. But for now, it's not. And I'll tell you, this is an outsourcing idea that was presented to me that just didn't work for our practice. They wanted to outsource the reception and scheduling of our patients. And I was always very hesitant to do that, because I thought, it's critically important to have somebody in the office to kind of manage those questions as you have questions for your optician, or you have an immediate question for the doc that you can just handle on the fly, physically there. And that's really been proven and vetted out through this COVID crisis time. I've had calls forwarded from the office to my cell phone with my office manager sort of managing the fort there physically, and us just trying to bounce back messages back and forth through text and phone calls is highly disjointed. So for us in this office, so that's something, to me, I don't think we'll ever outsource, is reception and scheduling and phone calls.
Yeah, that's excellent. Well, how about we have one more question here, and we'll have all of you go around with this, but we'll start with you, Paul, from the outsource from the vendor side. What is required to manage outsourcing vendors effectively?
Well, let me think about that from the kind of the initial engagement with an outsourcing vendor. I think a really key part is alignment of expectations on responsibility. And so no matter, whether it's social media or billing services, there's going to be, whether it's a workflow handoff or in-house responsibilities versus outsource, it's really important to make sure there's an alignment on that. When we chat with practices again that are looking at our services. That's one of the things we do. Obviously, we go over the services we provide and what we do, but we also make sure we go over what functionality and responsibility stays in the practice. Want to make sure that everybody's in sync getting started. So I think one key thing is alignment of expectations and responsibilities.
Kelly, Dr. Breedlove, anything you'd like to add to that?
We have found out that one of the most important things that we have found with our current vendor is just relationship. We know who to call. We have almost a personal relationship with the representative who handles our account. First name basis. We can call them direct phone numbers. We can call at any time. Constant communication by way of texting or emails concerning what's going on with our accounts. It's better than having a staff person in the office, and you don't have to pay unemployment for them or health insurance. And that has been, especially who we're working with now, has been totally different than the other outsourcing vendors for billing and insurance filing that we've had. It was a joy working with those individuals, knowing that they basically had our backs and they were going to bat for us. And they said, we'll go and we'll do what needed to pull these, even going back 1 or 2 years and trying to find money that's just sitting there. They didn't have to do that. Of course, they make some, if they get some, that they're going to have their percentage, but just over and above anything that you would just expect them to do on the regular business aspect, was definitely worth every penny that we've ever spent. And that's the big thing I would say when you're looking for someone to do these tasks. See what kind of relationship you can have with that person and not just your another name in the box.
Excellent. Kelly, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think Paul's dead on responsibility. I think that Dr. Breedlove's absolutely dead on relationship. I think if I were to add anything, I'd say just accountability. And this is in all aspects of life. I mean, whether you're hiring a contractor, clearly communicating what is expected and holding your vendors or your partners accountable to what you agree on in the front end. Now, you're not going to be able to solve for everything in the beginning, but I'd be very upfront about the things you struggled with and why you're reaching out to an outsourcing partner, and have them specifically address those in writing and holding those folks accountable. I'll say it again, my favorite type of outsourcing partner is those that share in your profit and revenue growth, not subscription services, et cetera. And it depends on the service itself, obviously, but generally speaking, those that share in the financial responsibility for driving growth have been some of the best partners for us too.
Great. So we are now at the end of our webinar. We have time for 2 questions. There was a question about the info on the company that Candace had, and then there was a question about, will there be a summary of this? Everyone will get a link to this, so they will be able to listen to this again. And there is one other question which I thought we should answer, and that is, it's something around staffing. How do you get buy-in from your staff for outsourcing? Because my guess is I think what's behind this question, there might be an uneasiness with staff feeling like they're being supplanted. How have you dealt with that, Dr. Breedlove?
We started after we had to fire our billing person. So it was easy. We just found that incompetence that was going on. Everything's great. You're trying to follow through the software, but you just see these things that aren't adding up, and oh no, I've got it under control, everything's fine, and then the person just ends up disappearing, not showing up, and that was an easy one for us to go, okay, there's got to be a better way. Fortunately, there is a better way, so we had no problem with that. I would say that unless a staff person just really loves doing the job, I would say I've never found one, or I've had one that truly loves doing billing and insurance filing.
Yeah, thank you so much. Kelly, anything you want to add to that before we close?
Sure, I'd say quickly that, I guess it depends on what specifically is being outsourced. It is a sensitive topic when people feel like they're being replaced. I know two of the facets of our practice that we've outsourced, directly to another company and took those tasks off of an employee. There was some immediate angst around that, so I don't want to pretend like it's not an issue, but I think you should be sensitive to that. The way we've addressed it, and I've told my staff this all the time, is that I don't intend for you to work for me forever. I want to build your skills. I want you to develop a career. If it brings you outside of my doors one day, that's fine, because I've done a good job, in that space. So to me, removing tasks from people to allow them to elevate and improve their skills in other areas is really a win-win conversation, but it is scary for some. So definitely manage those expectations with your staff, but do it in a positive light.
Wow, that is a wrap. This entire webinar has been just rich with these insights from both of you. And then I think coming from Paul, I think the idea of from a managed vendor, it really gives a perspective of what works and what doesn't coming from the vendor side. So thank you so much. This has been exceptional. As you know, those of you who joined the webinar, RevCycle Partners, we provide outsourced revenue cycle management services for the eye care industry, insurance billing, benefits and eligibility verification, and credentialing. As part of this webinar, we will follow up with an email. We'll give you the full recording of this webinar, and we'll also add in there a download called The 5 Hidden Costs of an In-House Biller, just to help you think through some of the costs that you may or may not be thinking about as you evaluate whether to outsource. Again, thank you so much for your time coming today on a Friday afternoon, and we hope that you have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Kelly. Thanks, Al.
Thanks, all. Stay safe and good luck.